The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple, another ancient item that was only resurfacing now, drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Ooh, sparkly, thought Renato. Renato distrusted doors that opened automatically, especially after being buried for millennia. Was this some sort of trap?
already here. Cawing in frustration, they were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. Boom! Haven't you always wanted to do that? What's for dinner, you thought? Hope it's not broccoli. Should have died a pirate, he thought. The mysterious sword from the east made you so fast you could catch a fly with your chopsticks. If that's what you really wanted. He'd once met a pirate captain. He used hooks to get around his ship. What was his name again?
Interrupted story time!
Caught the lead, Raven.
Now we'll never find out how it ended!
Imagine getting a horse up in one of these things. It would be cursing a blue streak. A gem of power. Ooh, you didn't find those every day. Don't get ahead of yourself, lad. So much about... Ooh, what was it again? could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. Renato hated cannon traps. Also, who reloaded these things anyway? He never figured that part out.
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? Give me blood. It was the stone, eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the Transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "It's the core," said the stone anxiously. Was he listening to a talking rock?
Ah, but the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old toad had sought for himself.
To be a hero, you had to sacrifice old friends sometimes, especially when they've become enemies.
As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Renato had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods before the Transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? Feed souls, it whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood. All right, I get it. This was going to be interesting. Renato told the corpses. It was something he'd seen in a play once. The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Reynardo. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power. The stone told him.
Firewalls only let you through if they think you're hot enough. This jewel was more than sparkly. It had arcane power and an engraving. To Cindy. He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? He hadn't noticed that path before. Didn't your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Reynardo, a little smug. There had to be something useful in these things, didn't there? Zenobia was waiting for Reynardo. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws.
Are you here to surrender? She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone. And I've missed you too, love. He chuckled.
She spotted the stone and bolted without another word. Renato had once invested in a jewel store, but it lost money. Someone kept robbing it. Twist, it was him.
Finally, Renato caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way. "Kill her," whispered the stone. "You cannot win your rebellion without it. Please." "No," said Zenobia. "Not that way." Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? With a flick of his wrist, he slashed Zenobia's throat. Her eyes widened even more. And then the light went out of them. Renato felt amazing. Power was rushing into him like water from a burst dam. Oh, such brilliance, exulted the Iblis stone. Tasty.
Renato returned to the Farfarer and set a course for the Nexus. The Empire had a communication outpost there. He could call the Emperor directly.
It was time to seize the outpost and let the Emperor know what he had done. The Nexus was beautiful. He never realized how beautiful. Everything glowed. The wind was so sweet, the sun so soft, the stones so warm, the black raven feathers. Black feathers. Suddenly, his eyes are filled with them. He's falling through smoke under a dead sun. A voice calls him home. Is this a vision? Whose? Is this the time of the lost gods? Or the future? No matter. What mattered now was killing his way to the Imperial outpost and challenging the Emperor from there.
This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board. There was a pleasant breeze coming through that door. Had it been closed before? chest that shiny deserve to be opened.
Up ahead was Lapino. What was he doing here?
Bernardo! Hey, buddy! Hey there, old buddy! Please don't kill me.
Why would I kill you? Asked Bernardo, although he had been thinking about it.
Well, you've become... no, I mean, no disrespect at all here. Kind of evil? Maybe you should, I don't know, go to the mountains to have a think? See if maybe you're sure the stone is not all that healthy a thing to keep?
I suppose you wanted, Bernardo said, and poked Lapino in the chest for emphasis. Oh, had he just killed Lapino? Damn it. He'd go to the outpost, use their far speaker, tell the Emperor what he'd done, and then he'd go to the secret rebel base, let them know he was ready to lead them to victory. Wouldn't his gauntlet look swell with that jewel in it? Renato rampaged through the Imperial outpost like a water buffalo rampaging. At the last moment, he remembered not to kill the Far Speaker Toad. After all, he wanted a word with the Emperor. But there was only silence. The Emperor was scared, like little girl. Well, he would gather the rebel army and slaughter the Imperial fleet. Yes! Applauded the Iblistone. Tremendous. Then the Emperor would have to answer his Far Speaker, wouldn't he? Who are you? Asked a distant voice that sounded uncomfortably like Zenobia. What have you become? The mountains. Go to the mountains, urged another that sounded a bit like Lapino. What are you doing? Demanded the Iblistone. I need to think, Renato told it. You're not good at thinking, said the Iblistone. You're good at killing. It's what you do. It's your destiny. But he set sail for the mountains, where he could be alone with his thoughts. Why were there Raven Scouts here in the empty mountains? Was there nowhere he could find peace and quiet? There were other ravens here too. Shadowy ones, transparent, lining the path. Ghosts. They cawed as he passed, but they didn't try to stop him. Spectators. Had he really killed that many ravens?
What was really fun was hooking yourself onto a moving ship.
Let's do this again sometime.
Then he saw her. Zenobia. She was a ghost too. She ran off when she saw him. How could a ghost be afraid? He followed her. He had to.
That is a very cool sword, thought Renaro. No, seriously. He couldn't feel his paw anymore.
When Renato went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous. Renato followed Zenobia's ghost. Had he gone mad, seeing ghosts? Was she running from him or leading him somewhere? He'd come here to be alone, but he'd never been less alone in his life. Every raven he had slain haunted these rocks. Was this who he was? A killer. He was terribly good at killing. He was an adventurer. Or was that just another word for killing? You kill, whispered the stone.
Couldn't they have put in an elevator? Or a giant eagle? Or something? Not everyone knew how to use magical gems. Of course, not everyone had magical gem gauntlets like he did.
It was a bit windy up here.
See? With enough leverage, you could go anywhere. If only he had some way to break the ice. Or convince it he was a friend. Tried to focus on the job he had to do. The rebellion. Wasn't there a battle coming soon? There'd be ravens to kill. Even an emperor. Such killing. Much wow. Ooh, he'd never been so excited.
Bernardo wondered idly if people who had built these poles had really, really long tentacles.
At the end of the mountain path, Zenobia awaited him.
Why did you kill me? She said. I was your prisoner, and I loved you. I needed the power, he said. Haven't you heard? There's a war on.
Then what's your excuse for killing me?
Asked his old friend Lapino, stepping out of the shadows.
Because you're a filthy traitor?
Said Renato. For once, Lapino didn't reply. The demon has twisted you, said Zenobia. Abandon the stone. You've lost too much already. Her words bit deeper than any sword ever had. So he shook his head, and once again swung his blade through her and Lapino. It had to all mean something. If he gave up the stone now, he would have sacrificed Zenobia and Lapino for nothing.
So, Renato set course for the Imperial fleet, where he would end it all. The Emperor, the war, the madness. Bernardo boarded an Imperial ship. No one could stop him slashing his way towards the Emperor. Yes, that was right. To give up now would be to lose everything for nothing. But if he could liberate the land from the Mad Emperor, then he could give up the stone in peace. And those were absolutely his own thoughts, not the stone manipulating him, right?
Oh, yes. Exalted the stone. Feel your power. We'll make history today.
He could hear a tiny voice within him.
Don't kill the Emperor. The stone will eat your soul. Was it madness? I have to kill the Emperor, he told himself. That's what it meant to be a hero. To do what had to be done, no matter how terrible the cost. Yes. And then you can have peace. Promised the stone.
His sword food teacher used to say power gems were cheating. Stupid old fart.
The tiny voice, whatever it was silent. He couldn't see ghosts around him, but he could feel them. If he gave up now, they would be angry. They would have all died for nothing. Who could give up this kind of power? Could anyone? Oh, he was just a fox with a talent for swordplay. How had this burden come to him? The Emperor offered the sword. Yes, peace. That is what he wanted now.
That gone beautifully. It was hard when you needed one.
I don't have to clean up around here, he thought.
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? The Emperor was cowering in front of his ship.
Please don't kill me.
Croaked Emperor Isengrim III.
Here, take the crown. I don't want it anymore.
You must kill him, or you will have his troops. He will send assassins.
Please, have mercy. The rebellion is won. Or you could be emperor. I'll just go be a scientist, or minstrel, or sell gummy bears. Yeah, I promise not to bother you.
It's your moment.
With all the love he'd ever had for Zenobia, for Lupino, for the kit foxes he would never have, Renato raised his sword. And Renato plunged his sword into his own chest.
Wait. What?
Renato screamed as his life force ebbed into the stone and surged back into him, and ebbed out and surged back in. Screamed the stone. It began to heat up.
What have you done?
The stone began to glow. It became white hot. It became lava. Nice knowing you, said Renato, as the lava ran like butter. And he died. But he learned another true thing. The Iblis stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. There would be a way to win. Renato could feel it. He'd have to explore choices he'd never made before he could figure it all out, though. And with that, the book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. And he fell.
The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens?
Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time.
Lapino's frantic message said that the Ravens were going to kill him for being a rebel spy. And that he had a clever plan.
If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse.
Or so Lapino had told him over the far speaker anyway.
Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens?
This chest made music when you opened it. Too bad it was Muzak. The Ravens had taken the town. Renato had seen villages emptied like this. All the people taken away to be sacrificed in the Emperor's secret rituals. Renato hoped the people were just hiding. Who made all these ore chests anyway? You could have quite a business doing that. It was definitely easier to fight inanimate objects. Renato thought of the Iblis stone and shivered. He had no business messing with ancient, cruel artifacts. What he needed was his friends around him. Clear eyes, full hearts. Can't lose. I need more materials, thought Renato. Renato knew the raw power he had gained could be molded into greatness. There was still no sign of Lupino. Not a hair, not a pellet. Was he hiding in the cemetery further down the road? That didn't seem like him. Aerobics craze. Am I right? Lupino would betray him. But now Renato knew that. What would Lupino do if he knew that Lupino was going to betray him? Well, he'd concoct some crazy scheme, wouldn't he? That used Lupino's betrayal against him and it would blow up in space. Thinking this. Well, that would be a first. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the Transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Renato had already let that armature slip away to save Lupino's life.
But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that.
The core of the Sky Ripper? Lapino's excited. That's an actual thing that we can just go and get. You've been busy.
He sure had. Renato told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. True, the core was capable of terrible, uncontrollable destruction. But this time, he was sure it would work great. It's beautiful here, thought Renato. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lapino was a traitor. But still, it was good company. It was time for a little exploration. Renato had been the terror of the sandcastles when he was 2. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be Imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead. Renato wondered if his future self had commissioned these poles. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones, but no healthy ones. And getting a bad feeling about this. Renato thought. Maybe Lapino was right. Maybe they should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. Of course there was a puzzle. You couldn't expect a transcendent emperor to bury a god's eye in a leather sack where anyone could pick it up.
Ow! 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 Ow!
As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides.
It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god.
How could he use it?
He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato ached to get away from it.
He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Renato ached to be rid of it.
Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost. The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato.
But what if Lapino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Lapino was a touchy rabbit. Renato knew that. You're brave, I know, Renato said. But this is what I was hired to do.
Oh, well, at least let me run ahead and warn them you're coming.
Renato wondered if Lapino was up to no good. What if the rabbit warned the Empire instead? Oh, but Lapino wouldn't betray him like that. Not again. Before it'd been a fluke, right? They finished the trip to the Nexus in silence. He would offer Lapino a chance to betray him, or not to. His old friend deserved another chance to prove true.
All right, Renato said. Go.
As Renato watched Lapino vanish on the horizon, he could feel nausea building in him. He felt ill. Could his knees really be aching this much? But how could he have handed the core off to Lapino? That was a recipe for disaster. Once, he found a Superman issue #1 in mint condition in a jar he'd broken. He planned to keep breaking things until he had the whole series. I wonder what happens if I go that way.
Kill the fox!
God, the ravens. Nobody said they were original. In this chest, there were woodcuts of amazingly beautiful vixens wearing no clothes at all. And something more useful.
Bernardo felt worse. All his joints were aching now. He'd been through beatings that felt better than this. So the core had a kind of poison that could harm you without even touching you. That's new. Well, it had power. The rebellion needed something with power. And how was this any worse than a sword wound? Well, a death by sword was sudden and fair. This was just squalid. A piecemeal death, like old age.
Building these platforms was so expensive, they'd run out of budget for guardrails.
With materials like this, he could probably make a really nice pair of barbecue tongs. Or even a sword.
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists everywhere. Bernardo found the mad rabbit cowering under a desk.
The ravens. They must have known we were coming, said Lupino. How did you... Well, see, I was doing a card trick with my lucky deck, and I kind of bobbled the cards, so I went under the desk to gather them up, and boom! I guess we'll have to take the car straight to the secret base.
Bernardo wasn't sure he believed that. But Lupino was talking so fast. He always seemed to make sense.
The secret rebel base. Yes. They had engineers there. But wait. Calaveras, the sage in the mountains. Maybe he would know what to do with the naked core. The core was killing him. He needed help. The sage, Calaveras, had given him the maps to find the armature and the core. If anyone knew the true name of the Transcendent Emperor, if anyone knew how to assemble the Sky Ripper, Calaveras did. If anyone could heal Reynardo and render the core safe, at least to its bearer, surely it was he.
The base of the mountain was the only safe place for a landing. He would have to continue on foot, muscles aching.
Calaveras was a scholar, not a doctor. Could he really save Reynardo from the poison radiating from the lost god's eye he was so recklessly carrying?
I pick you!
Smelt burnt fur. His.
Oh, that was not a fun way to die. Even if he survived. No one would write ballads about the fox whose knees ached forever, would they? Not unless he paid for it. He hated paying for publicity. Sometimes, Reynardo really hated inanimate objects. It was chilling walking through the living mountains. There was always noise up ahead. Insects, birds, the croak and flutter of ravens arranging ambushes. But close by, there was only the breeze and the trickle of melting snow. As if every living thing was holding its breath, his poisonous burden to move on.
How about a floating platform that simply just goes to the top? There was an inscription on the platform. Balaleka lessons, with an address. Time is running out for the rebellion. They might already be fighting the Imperial fleet. Everything hinged on Calaveras' ability to turn an exiled god's eye into something deadly.
The core, splendid, croaked Calaveras. Where's the armature?
Right, I was kind of hoping you wouldn't need it.
No, I don't. It's just a professional interest. We've got much better prismatics than the old TE ever did.
So Calaveras was an arcane engineer. He fussed at the core all day. He wrapped it with silver chains, and in front of it, he placed a huge, round ruby so that it looked like a monstrous, floating eye. Ah, so, what is it?
Yeah, I call it the Oculum. It's my very first death ray.
And it won't poison me?
Oh, no, it's completely safe now.
Anything I should watch out for?
Yeah, try to avoid pointing at any mirrors.
As he loaded the oculum onto the Farfarer, Bernardo was a little concerned about Calaveras. People who were utterly sure of themselves, he had found, were either experts or horribly wrong. Or both. But Bernardo only needed to fire the oculum once. He only needed to destroy one ship, the Emperor's ship, and the war was over.
Bernardo plunged into the Imperial fleet. He felt the oculum humming. He no longer felt sick. This was going to be fun. Or at least, it was going to be over. Bernardo resisted the temptation to fire the oculum until the time came. He could sense its arcane energies yearning to escape the sage's wrappings. But it wasn't eating him alive. So that was a plus.
He felt good about himself. He'd saved a friend, he'd helped the rebels, he'd relied on himself, but he'd listened to others. He felt like the right sort of hero. Wise, yet decisive. Calaveras had been so sure it would work.
Maybe he could fire it just a few times. No harm in that, right? But only when he absolutely needed to.
That was awesome! This chest was really awesome. See what I did there? What's behind door number 2? Renato, smash!
Once, Renato had been to a dungeon where all the chests were locked. It was awful. It's not personal, but you all smell terrible. Renato's arm was getting tired. The core was no longer eating at him, but he still felt weak. His stamina was shot. But he had the oculum. When the ravens swarmed him, it would sometimes fire its death ray. It seemed to be warming up too, firing more and more often. Maybe he should let it cool off. Yeah, he decided to stop using it entirely. Renato wondered what would happen if he jumped. Would he be rescued by an emergency platform?
oculum was still hot to the touch. He almost thought it was getting even hotter. Well, that was ridiculous, of course. Anyway, he'd only to fire it one more time, and then he could chuck the whole contraption into the abyss, and the Emperor's ship was now in range. Reynardo squinted. He could make out the line of ravens protecting the ship. Zenobia in front, conjuring. And on the deck, yes, that was His Imperial Majesty, pacing in his golden armor. Reynardo lined up his shot and fired. Caught in the beam, the ship burst into flames. The ravens and Zenobia exploded. The Emperor, too, exploded. Reynardo waited for the beam to stop, but it only got brighter, and the oculum hotter. Frantic, Reynardo pulled the oculum towards the abyss. The ruby burst into flames. The shiny metal casing glowed, then melted. That was good. Now the core could cool off, right? Reynardo ran. The blast incinerated him instantly, along with both fleets. The shockwave could be felt across all Erda. That winter, with neither Empire nor rebels to rule them, the islands slid into banditry. And so began the Second Age of Darkness. He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome.